UFOs in the Bible were the cherubim chariots of the gods. The cherubim are a somewhat mysterious topic that occurs numerous times in the Hebrew Bible. The Old Testament is never truly explained, and we're given only brief glimpses into their role and their nature. Since the information given is insufficient to truly answer the question posed, we'll have to attempt no such answer, but instead will present several possible partial interpretations which may or may not be mutually exclusive or contradictory. One thing that can be said with certainty is that the word cherubim is by definition a plural word. The suffix im indicates a plural noun. Therefore, although the word appears as cherubim, it should be read as the cherubim, a plural meaning. In the few cases where a single object is described, it can be assumed that the correct reading is one of the cherubim. This suffix also strongly implies an attribute which can best be described as living, quote unquote. The ancient Hebrew language contains many such words ending in the im suffix. Notably among them is Elohim, a plural group of living and intelligent beings, often interpreted as gods. The well-known Nephilim are another such example, or Raphaim. Dozens of further examples exist and are a topic of separate study by the author. The cherubim as guardian angels. Cherubim are commonly believed to be angels who act as powerful guards or attendants of the divine throne. The Bible supports this view to a point.
Have you protected a lot of children before, Mr. Casey?
What are you gonna do? I'm gonna go get her.
In Genesis 3:24, God places cherubim and a flaming sword at the Garden of Eden to guard the way of the tree of life. Elsewhere, numerous instances occur where the cherubim are associated with the throne of God. In the tabernacle and later in the temple, gold cherubim on the mercy seat do not signify the presence of God, not only signify presence of God, but also seem to act in some sort of protective capacity, as written in Exodus 37, 7-9, Numbers 7:89, and Psalm 81. However, this model of the cherubim as Yahweh's guardian angels falls a bit short when one considers the description and other activities ascribed to the cherubim throughout the scriptures. Chariot, flying vehicle, or top gun, different interpretations of the cherubim. In the Psalms and elsewhere in the Bible, that's Psalms are in the Old Testament, Yahweh is said to ride upon the cherubim. In many of these references, the cherubim are described as some kind of a flying vehicle, often compared to a chariot. This concept was influential in 2nd century BC Judaism, that an entire sect of Kabbalah mysticism formed around this so-called chariot that they called the Merkaba. King David, the author of the Psalms, most of the Psalms, describes thousands upon thousands of these flying cherubim and how they were instrumentally involved in several of his military victories. He even appears to indicate that certain tactics were prearranged ahead of time between himself and the cherubim in order to ambush the enemy. Some hints of this can be glimpsed in Psalms 18, Psalm 33, Psalm 68, and Psalm 102. This is also the origin of the phrases, the heavenly hosts and the Lord of hosts. The prophet Ezekiel put a slightly different twist on the concept. However, in Ezekiel's vision, sometimes interpreted to be a UFO encounter, he presents the cherubim not as a vehicle itself, but as living beings, quote unquote, that somehow controlled Yahweh's craft. There's an intriguing link in the stories of Ezekiel and Isaiah, which seem to equate the cherubim with another fascinating word, that is, the seraphim. The seraphim are understood to be snake-like in some regards, perhaps reptilian, but also representing and as possessing the power of flight. The parallels to global mythological components here are abundant, from the Greek god Triptolemus to the plumed serpent of the Mesoamerican lore and dragons of Chinese origin. Multifaceted, questioning interpretations of an asymmetric cherubim. Both Ezekiel and Isaiah wrote of their encounters with the cherubim, describing them as having multiple surfaces. Typically, these descriptions are translated as monstrous descriptions of creatures with many wings and with 4 faces. Quote, each creature had a face of a man, a face of a lion, a face of an ox, and the face of an eagle. It's an intriguing fact that the mythologies of several other creatures combine these same animals into their own versions of what might be the same phenomena. The roughly contemporary Babylonian mythology includes a creature called the Lamassu, with body parts taken from a bull, a lion, an eagle, and a man. And likewise, the Talmudic and deuterocanonical Asmodeus appears to have the same 4 faces in some depictions. Such depictions are thought to predate the many chimeric mythological creatures of a wide range of cultures, such as the Sphinx of Egypt and Asian fame, as well as the numerous Greek examples that may have an inspiration or influence on these later traditions. Whether through intelligent design or by purely evolutionary means, all terrestrial life appears to follow a handful of simple heuristics, one of the most prevalent of which is bilateral symmetry. Bilateral symmetry provides matching sets of many elements of gross anatomy, from pairs of arms and hands to pairs of eyes and ears. It's the reason that mirrors are effective in providing a reasonably accurate representation of reality. This is where one may begin to notice a problem with the classical interpretation of the multifaceted cherubim. They are apparently the only animal in the known universe to break the universal law of symmetry. Thus, it's my opinion, the author says, that the interpretation of the 4 faces suffers from translation problems. Animals just don't have 4 faces. The fact is that the text of the original Hebrew Bible is decidedly less clear regarding certain key words in these relevant passages. I don't think they were describing faces at all. Perhaps the other animals indicated are meant to provide some type of hint towards various attributes of the cherubim. In any case, the text contains enough ambiguity that we really need to question our assumptions on this translation. The cherubim as regional lords. The prophet Ezekiel opens up a rather intriguing tangential topic in his 28th chapter. This chapter is written as a message to be delivered from Yahweh through Ezekiel to someone called the Prince of Tyre. As a strange twist, Tyre is around Lebanon. Now, as a strange twist, Ezekiel specifically mentions a cherubim who was standing guard at Eden in Genesis 3. He actually equates this singular cherubim with the Prince of Tyre. But how can this be? This prince is the recipient and addressee of the prophet's message, obviously indicating that said prince must have been contemporary to the prophet, that is around 600 BC, and therefore capable of receiving a message from him. Yet Ezekiel claims that this same person was present at the Garden of Eden as part of a narrative that took place at a minimum of several thousand years prior to Ezekiel's lifetime. So this would seem to indicate that at the time of Ezekiel, this particular cherubim was thousands of years old, yet still lived, alive, residing, and ruling in the coastal city of Tyre in Lebanon. This fact may also indicate some level of support for the idea sometimes known as the 70 sons of El, as presented in the Ugaritic texts, The crux of this theory is that the earth is divided into several, ostensibly 70 territories, each ruled by a different regional god, one of whom is the God of Israel named Yahweh.
You give out your phone number. You give out your personal info too.
The theory is loosely evidenced by scripture with the event.
Don't use the names. Remember, all the names were pagan, and even to call yourself Israel is actually a bad mistake due to the fact each alphabet of every letter of that word stands for a fallen one, including the fallen one ISIS, and it gets worse than that.
Of said division referred to historically in Deuteronomy 32:8, the model of divine rulers, quote-unquote, also seems to agree with the extremely long lifespans of early biblical patriarchs, as well as the kings presented in the Sumerian king lists, the Aztec king lists, the Mayan calendar, and the wall murals at the Egyptian site of Dendera, all of which speak of ancient rulers of former epochs whose lifespans reached the inhuman lengths of several thousands of years. Remarkably, if these legends contain even a grain of truth, this may provide some evidence that human civilization is much older than currently believed in mainstream classicism, an idea that has been gradually gaining traction in recent years with such archaeological bombshells as Göbekli Tepe in what is today Turkey, and many other sites and finds which are pushing back long-held and ferociously guarded traditional dating and interpretations. Could the cherubim be living machines? Isaiah is clear in presenting the cherubim as a living intellectual being that is capable of occupying a position as a ruler over a city-state. Ezekiel makes a similar case when he speaks of, quote-unquote, four living creatures in his experience as described in the book of Ezekiel chapter 1. Although he does not use the word cherubim in his description, he later has a second experience of the same creatures as described in Ezekiel chapter 10, and this time he does include the name cherubim, clearly. However living these creatures may appear, Ezekiel's description also contains many elements which seem to indicate a more machine-like quality to the cherubim. He describes what appear to be separate mechanical components, using names which all end in the im suffix, which would normally indicate living beings. Apart from the cherubim, Ezekiel mentions the Ophanim, Panim, Kenapayim, Enayim, and Sokikim. All of these words present difficulty to translators, for they only ever appear in this context and therefore lack a Rosetta Stone to enable reliable translation. However, when read in context, they appear to be components of a highly technical system. Isaiah concurs with this in his narration, even going so far as to say that he heard the living being specifically naming certain subcomponents. Both Ezekiel and Isaiah describe not only humanoid living creatures, but also the machinations of what appear to be some sort of flying ship, spacecraft that is. According to Ezekiel's narrative, several metallic objects descend from the sky, accompanied by billowing thick clouds with lights shooting from within. Ezekiel also employs the Hebrew term Uma Asahem, which translates to a more general term meaning machinery. Isaiah indicates that the machines are fueled by combustion and that this vehicle transports him from Babylon to Jerusalem, a distance of nearly 3,000 kilometers or 1,864 miles. When taken together with the account of Genesis 3, the prophet's description appeared to indicate a type of smart machine, and the cherubim may be interpreted as some kind of robotic entity or perhaps parts of an advanced and almost intelligent control system. And woven into Judaism, in the book of Exodus, Yahweh handpicks a skilled craftsman named Bezalel to work on a special project. The project includes the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant, both of which are said to include cherubim. Bezalel receives special detailed instructions from Yahweh regarding how to implement the cherubim to a very specific blueprint. As discussed in further detail in the book UFOs in the Bible, the author says that these cherubim are not simply decorative embroidered tapestries and sculptures, as is commonly believed. In fact, the Israelites had just been given a commandment by God expressly forbidding them to create visual and graphic arts. It says, "You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below." This is stated in the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20-4. Clearly, it's ludicrous to assume that God would forbid such work, then immediately turn around and order exactly such a project. Rather, the work of Bezalel appears to be more closely related to the technical.
In other words, the fallen ones are the ones that have made it the ark. It wasn't supposed to be made. It was all to get men to serve them. The book got you to love the devil.
Algorithms of computer engineering. The Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle itself are fabricated to highly specific instructions out of materials including semiconducting materials and component arrangements recognizable to today's electronic engineers. These apparently high-tech items were themselves woven into the Hebrew religion at a fundamental level, becoming the central focus of the most holy rituals of ceremonial Judaism for the next several hundred years, before vanishing without a trace into the midst of legend. The great mystery of the cherubim. In a fascinating semantic twist, the modern Hebrew language may hold some subconscious ancient knowledge. Cherub is the word in modern Hebrew which translates to approximation or estimation. This is a crucial concept to consider. Words themselves are merely representations of some underlying object or concept. The words model the concepts. They're not intended to be an exact representation, nor is such an intention possible. Is it conceivable that the concepts swirling around the cherubim are so inherently complex or alien that we can only hope to achieve a rough approximation or understanding? Is the notion baked right into the Hebrew language to this day? It's certainly difficult to get a firm grasp on what the cherubim really are. The truth is, no one really knows what the cherubim are, although the common perception is that they are small, baby-faced angels who live in the clouds. There is absolutely no evidence of such a conclusion in the ancient texts. Rather, they are presented as smart yet machine-like, and in any case, very strange. Perhaps if there is one thing we can learn from the cherubim, it's simply this, that we think we know. What we think we know is often wrong. This is by Ken Goodsword, author of UFOs in the Bible, sourced from Ancient Origins Net. This is on Humans Are Free. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Finally, support my Patreon account